Hello and welcome everyone to Inside the Publisher Lab, the show where we dive a little bit deeper into some of the topics that we talk about on our podcast, The Publisher Lab. Shelby, what did we decide we were going to dive into deeper today?
Yeah, so during our podcast, we talked about this program that the Financial Times has established. So they open up their paywall to participating schools and students, and they curate a nice little newsletter to all the students that are relevant to their majors. And so they're creating brand loyalty among a young audience. So I thought we could dive into some other ways to create brand loyalty as well.
Yeah, that was a really great topic, and we talked a little bit about kind of how they're uniquely positioned to do something like this in a way that maybe not all publishers can, but the ability to potentially find audiences that someone else has, someone else's newsletter, something like that, and curate content for them is a real opportunity. But one of the things we didn't talk about on the podcast were some of the other types of things that publishers can do to generate brand loyalty. And it sounds like the Financial Times is doing some of those things as well. So what were those?
Yeah, so the Financial Times they also do these quizzes that test students on the biggest news stories of the year. So that's kind of a fun way to make sure that students keep reading and rewards them basically for reading their stories.
Yeah, and I think if you're a publisher that generates content on a particular niche or subject, one of the things you can do to build either brand loyalty or create content that people want to share or engage with is to basically say, are you an expert in this material somehow? Whether it's because you're a consistent reader or you want to basically challenge your readers because maybe they're obsessed with the same types of things that your content is based on. So if you have a video game website or something like that, maybe it would be fun to quiz your readers on the history of different types of video games or something along those lines. So I think quizzes are really a great way to A, engage your audience, and B, maybe even get them to share some material.
Right. Another thing that the Financial Times does is they partner with institutions to do writing competitions.
Yeah, and that's a really great way to create user-generated content, right? So to be able to create a contest or something else that gets your readers to basically start interacting with you and generating their own content, that can be a lot of fun. And I know there are some, issues with user-generated content. You lose a little bit of control, but I think that by making it into a content format or a format in which people understand that they're going to be submitting content that may or may not be published, it gives you that kind of like ability to kind of have a governor on the top of things and choose what types of content you push back out to the user base.
I also think it helps users kind of feel more attached to the brand and they feel like they're participating. It gives them definitely a closer relationship.
It's interesting you mentioned that because I had actually just saw a study the other day and they were talking about podcasts that were growing the fastest, and they mentioned that all the podcasts that were growing the fastest had one theme that seemed to have in common, and they were trying to pull listeners into the podcast by having like listeners call into a voicemail line or something like that and leave a voicemail for the people to listen to on air. And I thought that was really interesting because that's like an old radio thing, right? That's something from the old world, to call into a talk show or something along those lines.
Yeah.
And so
taking some pointers from traditional media.
that's right. But I think the real thing is like you mentioned before, just finding ways to engage your audience so that they feel like part of it.
Another thing that the Financial Times isn't doing, but possibly a way to also gain some brand loyalty, is sweepstakes or giveaways. What are your thoughts on those?
Yeah, I think for the right publisher, they definitely can be. I know a lot of publishers that listen to this show and listen to our podcast are what I would consider a organic publisher or evergreen, meaning you create content from people that search things online, which is great. It's a great traffic source. It's one of the least volatile at the moment. But one of the things you may want to look at is how do you create how do you own your audience, right? And how do you own them outside and on different platforms? And I think whether you're on social media or you're trying to build a newsletter, one of the best ways to create kind of a following and keep people attached to you in some way is to do sweepstakes and giveaways and contests where you would essentially offer something to visitors willing to sign up for a newsletter or follow you on a social platform or YouTube or something along those lines. And it doesn't have to be something big or grand. It can be something related to your material. In some cases, it could be something that costs almost nothing at all. even just recognition in some cases. So I think it's a really great idea. I think for the right publishers, it can be a really good fit.
And there are also different brands that you could potentially partner with who are willing to give you free products to do these giveaways as well.
Yeah, we mentioned, I used the example of video games earlier, but I'm sure if you had a popular video game website, there's probably plenty of brands and accessory providers and things like that would be willing to give you something away for free, and they get to do a little bit of free advertising, and you get to give something away to your visitors and grow your audience. So yeah, I think it can be a win-win if you just want to think creatively about it. That's it. That's it for Inside the Publisher Lab today. Those are some things you can do to build brand loyalty and engage your audience a little bit further. If you want to dive any deeper into those subjects, you can always listen to our podcast, The Publisher Lab. We publish it each week on Fridays with very few exceptions. Shelby's done a good job of keeping us consistent there. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Inside the Publisher Lab.